Welcome back to Rare CoinX PRO. Today we are exploring 4 remarkable Lincoln wheat pennies from the heart of post-war America, coins that passed through millions of hands during one of the most energetic and optimistic decades in United States history, and that today tell a story far richer than their 1-cent face value would ever suggest. These 4 coins span the years 1948 through 1951, a time when America was rebuilding, growing, and dreaming bigger than ever before, and the right example of any one of them can surprise even the most experienced collector. Stay with us all the way to the end because our final coin carries a mintage figure that tells one of the most dramatic conditional rarity stories in the entire wheat cent series. Let's start with our first coin, the 1948 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny. By 1948, the United States was 3 full years into the extraordinary business of post-war recovery, and the energy and optimism of that moment were everywhere. The GI Bill was sending veterans to college and helping them buy homes in brand new suburbs. Television was beginning to appear in living rooms across the country, transforming family life in ways nobody could quite predict. The Berlin airlift was underway in Europe, a dramatic demonstration of American resolve at the dawn of the Cold War. Harry Truman was pulling off one of the most improbable election victories in American political history, defeating Thomas Dewey despite virtually every major newspaper in the country predicting he would lose. And at the Philadelphia Mint, the presses were running steadily and confidently, producing the copper pennies that ordinary Americans needed for their ordinary but extraordinary daily lives. The Philadelphia Mint produced 317,570,000 wheat pennies in 1948, making this the most common variety of the year, a substantial figure that places the 1948 no-mint mark penny firmly in the accessible category for circulated examples. That production number reflects the commercial energy of a booming post-war economy where millions of Americans were spending money with a freedom and confidence that the war years had made impossible, and it means that finding a circulated 1948 Philadelphia cent is never a challenge. But finding one in the pristine, fully red, gem, uncirculated condition that collectors pay the most for is an entirely different and far more rewarding story. When it comes to history and condition, the 1948 Philadelphia cent presents one of the more rewarding cherry-picking opportunities in the late wheat cent series. Philadelphia pennies from 1948 are noted for typically strong strikes with sharp wheat stalk and clear Lincoln portrait details, which is genuinely good news for collectors who want a well-made coin rather than one softened by weak die pressure. The challenge is finding one that has survived over 7 decades with its original copper brilliance intact, since the combination of high production and immediate widespread circulation meant that most 1948 Philadelphia cents accumulated wear and toning long before any collector had a chance to set them aside. Look for Lincoln's hair showing each individual strand cleanly defined, wheat stalks where every grain reads crisply, and surfaces that carry original copper red rather than the brown oxidation that time inflicts on unprotected bronze coins. The background and composition of this coin marks the return to the classic wheat cent formula that had served American commerce since 1909. The 1948 wheat penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, returning the tin content that had been absent from the shell case cent years of 1944 through 1946. This restoration of the standard bronze alloy gives the 1948 Philadelphia cent a richer, more characteristically copper-red tone than its immediate predecessors when preserved in uncirculated condition, and a truly gem-red 1948 Philadelphia penny has a visual warmth and brilliance that makes it one of the most beautiful late wheat cents in any collection. Victor David Brenner's Lincoln portrait graces the obverse with that quiet dignity it had carried since 1909, while Christopher Ironside's 2 wheat stalks on the reverse continue the design tradition that would survive just 10 more years before the Lincoln Memorial reverse replaced them forever in 1959. Collector demand for the 1948 no-mint mark penny is healthy, enthusiastic, and wonderfully accessible at the entry level while remaining genuinely competitive at the top. The date appeals to history-minded collectors who want to complete the post-war Philadelphia cent sequence, to condition specialists hunting for gem-red survivors, and to variety collectors who enjoy the documented error hunting opportunities this date provides. Some Philadelphia 1948 pennies show a doubled die obverse variety, with subtle doubling on Liberty or the date visible under 10 times magnification, which can add significant collector premiums, and the auction record for this variety stands at $10,350 for an MS-67 red example, making it one of the more exciting variety finds in the late Philadelphia wheat cent series. For current market value, circulated 1948 no-mint mark wheat pennies are worth between $58,000 and $150,000 in typical worn grades, while exceptional examples in MS-67 grade with full red color have sold for $231,000 to $583,000 at major auctions, and a pristine MS-67 plus red specimen fetched over $1.60 million at heritage auctions. The double die obverse variety in its finest certified grades has reached over $10,000, making every 1948 Philadelphia cent worth a careful examination under magnification before it changes hands. For collectors, here are some wonderful and practical tips for pursuing the 1948 no-mint mark cent. First and most importantly, always examine the obverse carefully under a 10-power loop, specifically looking for double die varieties on Liberty and the date, since the double die obverse on 1948 Philadelphia cents can add significant collector premiums, and finding one in a bulk lot or old roll is a genuinely achievable and deeply satisfying goal. Second, when assessing color on this coin, remember that the return to tin bronze alloy in 1947 means the 1948 Philadelphia cent has a slightly different baseline tone from the shell case cents of 1944 to 1946, and a truly original, unaltered full red example of this date has a particular richness of copper color that experienced collectors recognize immediately. Third, never clean a 1948 cent, or any copper coin, no matter how dull or unappealing it might look, since cleaning permanently destroys the numismatic value of copper coins by removing the natural patina that grading services use to assess authenticity and originality. Now let's move on to our second coin, the 1949 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny. Our second coin today carries us forward 1 year into a 1949 America that was navigating the early tensions of the Cold War with characteristic resilience and determination. NATO was being founded in April, bringing 12 nations together in a historic mutual defense agreement. The Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb in August, shocking the American scientific and political establishment and intensifying the arms race overnight. Mao Zedong proclaimed the People's Republic of China in October, reshaping the geopolitical map of Asia. And at the Philadelphia Mint, the presses were running at a measured but productive pace, striking the copper cents that everyday Americans needed for their everyday lives. The Philadelphia Mint struck 217,775,000 Lincoln cents without a mint mark in 1949, a substantial figure that places this date in the common category for circulated examples, though notably lower than the extraordinary production years of the mid-1940s. That lower production figure compared to neighboring years gives the 1949 Philadelphia cent a slight but meaningful edge in relative scarcity, and it is one of the reasons why the finest examples command auction results that some collectors find genuinely surprising. One of the most historically interesting facts about the 1949 Lincoln cent is one that many collectors overlook entirely. The mint struck no proof Lincoln cents in 1949, as they were focused entirely on circulating coinage, and proof production would not resume until 1950. This means that if you are building a complete proof set of Lincoln wheat pennies, 1949 is one of the years you simply cannot fill, which gives the 1949 business strikes a certain completeness of their own as the definitive representation of that year in any serious collection. There is also a wonderfully quirky collector phenomenon specific to Philadelphia Lincoln cents from the late 1940s and early 1950s, a web-like staining pattern found mainly on Philadelphia Lincoln cents from 1949 to 1952, caused by a reaction between the copper and certain chemicals used in the storage and transport of coins during this era. Collectors who understand this phenomenon know to look specifically for 1949 Philadelphia cents that have escaped this staining, since clean, unstained examples are genuinely more desirable and meaningful to add to a high-grade collection. When it comes to condition, because 217 million were minted, these are not rare in a general sense, but because many people spent them during the late 40s and 50s, high-quality examples are surprisingly scarce today. This is the paradox that makes the 1949 Philadelphia cent such a rewarding hunt. The coin is everywhere in worn grades but genuinely challenging to find in pristine, gem-red condition. Look for sharp hair detail on Lincoln's portrait, a well-defined cheekbone, and crisp, individually readable grains on the wheat stalks, all presented in a bright, fully red copper surface that has not been touched by toning, spotting, or oxidation. The background and composition follows the beloved wheat cent formula. Like all wheat pennies of the era, the 1949 Philadelphia cent is struck in 95% copper with 5% tin and zinc, weighing 3.11 grams and measuring 19 millimeters in diameter. Brenner's Lincoln portrait and the wheat stalk reverse connect this coin to a design tradition that was already 40 years old by 1949, and yet the design retained all of its dignity and elegance across every one of those decades. Collector demand for the 1949 no-mint mark penny is driven primarily by date-set builders and condition-focused collectors who appreciate the challenge of the gem grades. The 1949 no-mint mark variety actually has a lower survival rate in high grades compared to some Denver issues, making the hunt for a pristine 1949 Philadelphia penny quite exciting for hobbyists. Era varieties also add interest to this date, with off-center strikes selling for $15 to $100 or more depending on the degree of misalignment, and die breaks and minor double dies adding modest but real premiums for variety specialists. For current market value, a 1949 penny with no mint mark is typically worth $50,000 to $120,000 in circulated condition and up to $250,000 or more if uncirculated. At the very top of the grading scale, the most valuable 1949 Philadelphia penny sold for $812,075 at auction in 2006, a record-setting coin that displayed exceptional preservation with full original red copper luster. $12,000 for a 1949 Philadelphia cent. That is conditional rarity in its most powerful and inspiring form. For collectors, the key tip with the 1949 no-mint mark cent is patience. Because high-grade red examples are genuinely scarcer than the mintage numbers suggest, taking the time to examine multiple examples before committing to a purchase is always worthwhile. Look specifically for coins free of the web-like staining pattern associated with Philadelphia cents of this era, and focus on examples where the original copper red luster is both bright and even, without patches of toning or oxidation that could indicate improper storage over the decades. Now let's move on to our third coin, the 1950D mint mark Lincoln wheat penny. Our third coin today carries a small letter D beneath the date that identifies it as a product of the Denver Mint, and that single letter opens up one of the most beautifully counterintuitive stories in all of Lincoln cent collecting. Because the 1950D is the coin that most perfectly illustrates a principle that every serious collector comes to understand eventually, that mintage numbers and collector value are often completely unrelated when condition enters the picture. The 1950D Denver Mint circulation strike holds the year's auction record at $20,400 for a single MS-68 red specimen, despite having the highest mintage of any 1950 cent variety. Let that sink in for a moment. The most common variety by production numbers holds the highest auction record. That is conditional rarity at its most dramatic, and it makes the 1950D one of the most instructive and exciting dates in the entire wheat cent series for collectors who want to understand how this hobby really works. The historical backdrop of 1950 Denver is rich with meaning. The Korean War had just begun in June, and America was once again navigating the uncomfortable tension between peacetime prosperity and military commitment. The year 1950 also marked something genuinely special in American numismatic history. Proofs came back. The mint had suspended proof coinage from 1943 through 1949 to support the war effort and post-war coin production demands, and 1950 marked their return, with exactly 51,386 proof cents struck for collectors. That proof resumption happened at Philadelphia, not Denver, but it cast a spotlight on the entire 1950 cent series and made collectors pay close attention to every variety from that year, including the Denver business strike. The 1950D wheat penny had a total mintage of 334,950,000 coins struck at the Denver Mint, making it the year's most abundantly produced variety by a comfortable margin. And yet, as with every wheat cent from this era, the combination of immediate widespread circulation and decades of subsequent handling means that pristine gem red survivors are extraordinarily difficult to find. Despite high mintage, high-end Denver coins are surprisingly rare in full red, and strong market interest surrounds top-quality D-mint examples, creating exactly the kind of collector excitement that makes hunting for this date so rewarding. In terms of history and condition, the Denver Mint in 1950 was a well-established and highly productive facility, and its 1950 cents tend to show generally decent strike quality. However, the sheer volume of production meant that coins were handled roughly immediately after striking, resulting in the bag marks and contact marks that doom most examples to the lower mint state grades. Finding a 1950D with genuinely clean, mark-free surfaces in full red condition is the challenge that makes the top examples so valuable. Look for Lincoln's hair showing individual, well-defined strands, a cheekbone and jaw with full original roundness, and wheat stalks on the reverse where every grain is crisp and cleanly readable. The background and composition of this coin connects it proudly to the great wheat cent tradition. Made primarily of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, the 1950D is part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series which began in 1909 and continued the wheat reverse design until 1958. The D mint mark sitting just below the date on the obverse identifies this coin as a product of Denver, a facility that had been striking coins with distinction since 1906. Brenner's Lincoln Portrait and Ironside's wheat stalk reverse look exactly as they did in 1909, 41 years of design continuity that gives every wheat cent a shared visual language across the decades. Collector demand for the 1950D is genuinely vibrant at every level. Entry-level collectors find circulated examples accessible and affordable. Intermediate collectors hunting for nice uncirculated pieces in the MS63 to MS65 range find a date with enough supply to make the search enjoyable without being impossibly common. And at the very top of the market, the record numbers speak for themselves. The 1950 cent demonstrates a critical principle in numismatics: conditional rarity trumps mintage, and the highest mintage 1950D holds the year's auction record at $20,400 for a single MS68 red specimen. $20,400. For a penny bearing the Denver Mint mark from 1950. That is the number that every collector of this date carries in their memory, because it reframes what this coin is and what it can become in the right condition. For current market value, the 1950D Lincoln Wheat Penny is worth approximately 6 cents in average condition and can be worth between 74 cents and $2.50 or more in uncirculated mint state condition. At gem grades with full red color, typical 1950D wheat penny value at MS65 red coins can sell for $50 to $120, while MS67 red or higher jumps to $1,000 or more, building toward that extraordinary MS68 record that stands as one of the most compelling auction results in the entire late wheat cent series. For collectors, the most valuable tip for the 1950D is to embrace the hunt for conditional rarity with genuine enthusiasm. This is a date where the challenge is not finding the coin, it is finding the coin in a condition that most examples never achieved. Focus your search on original, untouched examples that still show blazing red copper luster, and always use a loupe to check surfaces carefully for the bag marks and contact marks that characterize so many 1950D cents from the heavy production environment of the Denver facility. The repunched mint mark varieties documented on this date are also worth checking for, since with 149 mint mark varieties cataloged, a careful cherry picker has real opportunities to find something special. And now, let's take a look at our fourth and final coin, the 1951D Mint Mark Lincoln Wheat Penny. We arrive at our fourth and final coin, and it is one that combines a truly staggering production figure with the kind of conditional rarity story that every wheat cent collector comes to appreciate as they deepen their knowledge of this wonderful series. The 1951D Lincoln Wheat Penny is the Denver Mint's contribution to a year that was both historically significant and numismatically fascinating, and understanding its full story requires looking beyond the mintage number to the far more interesting question of what that number actually means for collectors today. America in 1951 was a nation of remarkable contrasts. The Korean War was intensifying on the Korean Peninsula, with American forces engaged in some of the most difficult fighting since World War II. At home, however, the economy was booming with a confidence and energy that seemed almost disconnected from the conflict overseas. Television was transforming American culture at an extraordinary pace, with programming reaching into more and more living rooms every week. The first commercial computers were beginning to appear. And at the Denver Mint, the presses were running at a pace that would produce one of the largest annual cent mintages in the entire post-war era. The Denver Mint struck a massive 625,355,000 pennies in 1951, making the 1951 D the most common variety of the year. 625 million coins from the Denver facility alone. That is an extraordinary figure even by the generous standards of late wheat cent production, and it places the 1951 D firmly among the most accessible dates in the entire series for collectors looking for affordable, historically meaningful examples in circulated grades. But as we have seen with every coin in today's video, the relationship between production numbers and collector value becomes deeply interesting when you move up the grade scale, and the 1951 D is no exception to that rule. Antiques know-how. The 1951 D is part of the final decade of what collectors call the Wheatie period, with only 7 more years remaining before the Lincoln Memorial reverse would replace the beloved wheat stalks forever in 1959. That end-of-an-era quality gives the entire early 1950s wheat cent series a particular resonance for collectors who appreciate the historical narrative embedded in their coins, and the 1951 D sits comfortably and meaningfully within that narrative as a coin from the penultimate chapter of the series. Coin identifier. When it comes to history and condition, the 1951 D presents one of the classic cherry-picking challenges of the late post-war wheat cent series. While the 1951 D is not rare, collectors prize examples with full red color, original copper luster, rather than brown or red-brown toning, and finding a truly blazing, fully red gem example from a production run of over 625 million coins requires exactly the kind of patient, knowledgeable searching that makes this hobby so deeply rewarding. The Denver Mint's high-volume production environment in 1951 meant that coins were handled heavily immediately after striking, and the bag marks, contact marks, and surface abrasions that resulted from that handling prevent most examples from reaching the highest uncirculated grades. Look for individually defined strands in Lincoln's hair above the ear, a cheekbone and jawline that retain their full original three-dimensional contour, and wheat stalks on the reverse where every grain reads crisply and cleanly from top to bottom. The background and composition of this coin carries all the hallmarks of the classic late wheat cent design. The 1951 D wheat penny is made from 95% copper. It is part of the wheat penny series treasured by collectors for its historical significance and classic design. Victor David Brenner's Lincoln portrait faces right on the obverse with "In God We Trust" arching above and "Liberty" to the left, with the D mint mark sitting just below the date identifying this coin as a Denver product. The reverse carries Christopher Ironside's 2 wheat stalks framing 1 cent and E pluribus unum, the same design that had appeared on the cent since 1909 and would continue for 7 more years. The reverse side shows the wheat ears design, representing American agricultural productivity, a quiet but meaningful symbol of the nation's strength and abundance that gave the entire series its beloved nickname. Bullion Shark Coin Identifier. Look for repunched mint mark varieties where the D was stamped twice, creating subtle but collectible doubling of the mint mark itself, which can be worth $10 to $50 depending on the strength of the doubling. Repunched date varieties are also documented on this issue, which show doubling in the date numerals and can add $10 to $50 to the value depending on prominence and grade. The 1951 D wheat penny would make a great addition to any Lincoln Cent series collection, and cherry-picking is possible and advised to ensure a well-struck coin with attractive surfaces. Coino Plus 2. Collector demand for the 1951 D sits in a very comfortable and welcoming position for collectors at every level. At the entry level, circulated examples are so affordable and so readily available that this is one of the best possible starting points for anyone building a complete Denver wheat cent date set. At the intermediate level, nice uncirculated examples in the MS63 to MS65 range with red-brown and red color designations attract consistent buyer interest from collectors who appreciate the combination of accessibility and visual appeal that this date offers. And at the very top of the market, the conditional rarity of gem red survivors creates real and sustained competitive interest from registry set collectors who understand the challenge of finding a truly pristine example from that enormous 625 million coin production run. For current market value, the 1951 D Lincoln Wheat penny is worth 6 cents in average condition and can be worth 74 cents to $2.50 or more in uncirculated mint state condition. Circulated D wheat pennies start from 10 cents, while uncirculated specimens in MS63 bring $4 to $6, and MS65 examples command $12 to $20. As the grade climbs higher, the numbers become genuinely exciting. The 1951 D penny value reaches $1,200 to $1,500 in MS67 and has exceeded $2,000 or more for the finest certified MS68 examples. While readily available in most grades, Denver coins in MS67 red can bring $100 to $230, with MS68 grades commanding higher premiums reaching up to $5,000 or more. And the auction record for this date is a genuinely inspiring number. The current auction record is $4,230 for an MS67 Plus red coin, a result that perfectly illustrates how conditional rarity can transform an otherwise common coin into something a serious collector is willing to pay significant money to acquire. For collectors, here are some genuinely rewarding tips for pursuing the 1951 D. First, always cherry-pick aggressively for color and surface quality, since with a mintage of over 625 million the coin is everywhere in worn grades but significantly scarcer in the full red gem condition that drives the highest premiums. Second, examine every D mint mark carefully under a 10-power loop for repunched mint mark varieties, since these documented errors can add meaningful premiums to what would otherwise be a standard example, and finding one in a bulk lot is a genuinely achievable and satisfying goal. Third, pay close attention to the strike quality when selecting uncirculated examples, since cherry-picking is possible and advised to ensure a well-struck coin with attractive surfaces, and a sharply struck 1951 D with full detail in Lincoln's hair and the wheat stalks is always more desirable and more valuable than a softly struck example of the same grade. And finally, always store any copper wheat cents you value in archival quality holders away from humidity and atmospheric exposure, since copper is sensitive to environmental changes and a coin that has survived over 70 years in excellent condition deserves every protection you can give it for the decades to come. As we have seen today, these 4 Lincoln wheat pennies from 1948, 1949, 1950, and 1951 prove that even the most familiar and modest-looking coins in American numismatic history can carry extraordinary stories, hidden varieties, and values that range from a few cents to tens of thousands of dollars when condition, color, and rarity align in just the right way. Whether you are just beginning your collecting journey or you have been hunting coins for years, the Lincoln Wheat Penny series offers something truly special for every level of collector, and these 4 dates in particular deserve a proud place in any serious collection. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you never miss another exciting coin video from Rare CoinX PRO. Share it with your friends and fellow collectors, and we will see you in the next one. Happy collecting!